Is he able to use the clout of the US to extract concessions out of other countries? I think he's demonstrated that he's quite capable of doing that.
So could you call him a bully then?
I think that probably is a more accurate description.
Jenny Gordon, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Is Donald Trump a master negotiator like he claims, or is this all just optics?
Well, that's a really interesting question, because it depends how you classify a master negotiator. One who's getting great outcomes for the country. I don't think we can put him in that category, but is he able to use the clout of the US to extract concessions out of other countries? I think he's demonstrated that he's quite capable of doing that.
So could you call him a bully then?
I think that probably is a more accurate description. It certainly, might is right seems to be the attitude he's taken, rather than cooperative win-win solutions.
Well, export restrictions on US beef have been one of the Trump administration's key grievances with Australia. Do you think relaxing the biosecurity restrictions on US beef will be to the detriment of Australian beef producers?
I don't think it's going to affect Australian beef producers much at all, partly because, we're highly efficient at producing beef. We actually export considerable amounts to the United States, more in the sort of hamburger end. And we might have some high-end imports of US really high-quality beef, but I don't think that's going to knock the Australian market around much at all. And the other thing is that right now the US is rebuilding their herds, so they don't actually have a lot of beef to export. But the other thing is that the other source of risk is changing this biosecurity really a risk to the industry? And I think that's why it's been a 10-year process to demonstrate that the US market, or imports from the US, are not actually going to be posing a foot and mouth or other biosecurity risk to the Australian beef producers, which was the concern and why the restrictions were brought in the first place.
Well, do you think allowing the US beef imports will help Australia at the negotiating table to reduce the baseline 10% tariff that we're likely to be subject to?
I don't think we're going to get rid of the baseline 10% tariff. I think this time round Trump has demonstrated that he's not for moving, and he does have some economists behind him on this in terms of something called optimal tariff theory, which means if you're a big country that has a lot of market power, you can actually put a tax on the exporters that are trying to access your market, and they will pay some of that tax. And so as a revenue raiser, that tariff is at around about the 10%. The challenge is that once you raise the tariff beyond that, it actually starts reducing the amount of revenue you raise, because your domestic consumers end up paying more and more of that tariff cost. And so from that perspective, a uniform 10% tariff might be quite good for the United States. It's not good for anybody else. It's definitely using the US market power in a way that is beggar thy neighbour type of policy. But I doubt we're going to move past that. So I think this looks good. As you come back to the Trump the Great Negotiator, the more we can say these are wins and he's negotiated this win, even if it actually doesn't make that big a difference, the better position Australia will be in.
In Japan's case, in order to secure a 15% tariff rather than the previous 25%, Japan had to make some concessions. What's it doing?
There's two big areas. So one is opening up its market of rice, and so currently the Japanese price of rice is through the roof, and so for them actually importing more rice will bring down prices, and that's always been a sore point for Japan. But they do already import considerable amount of US rice. About 20% of US rice exports already go to Japan, so it'll be interesting to see just how much that changes over time. And then where do they US take it from? Where are they selling it at the moment that they're now going to sell it to Japan? Are they going to produce a whole bunch more rice and produce less of other things? So that's on the rice side. The big concern was the automobile tariff for Japan, because the US is a very large market for Japan. But the concessions that they had to make are really interesting, because last year, or in 2023, Japan invested about $750 billion into the United States. So the question is this $500 billion and the conditions under which Japan will be, investing in the United States, very different from what it was doing anyway. And is Japan sort of saying, well, we can do this and we'll negotiate the kind of fine details later? But on the face of it, it sounds as though Trump would have considerable control over which sectors that investment went in, and very interesting claims that 90% of the profits would stay in the United States, which is really, if that's true, then that really is a major concession and an extraction of value in a way that, no investor would actually want to invest in the United States if they're going to pull those kinds of, we're going to tax you at 90% of your profits, which is effectively what that is doing.
Europe looks set to also lock in a trade deal with the US. Is that area's automobile exports to the US also a big bargaining chip for the US president?
I think so. And if the Europeans don't come to an agreement, then the Japanese will do quite well because they will be more competitive relative to the European exports of motor vehicles. And so that will be something that the Europeans will definitely be looking for. Whether they will be willing to invest under the same kind of circumstances as Japan is really open to question. I think they're in a very difficult situation, but they also potentially have a little bit more scope for retaliation, and so they might be able to negotiate a different outcome. But this is just not good for the global economy, this kind of, tariffs and retaliatory tariffs and, whatever you want to call them. And it's really undermining global trade and what has driven, economic growth around the world. So it's a very concerning kind of set of outcomes.
Well, that brings me to my next question because, of course, August 1 is the tariff deadline. Is it going to be neatly wrapped up by then, or does this uncertainty around international trade continue to cause chaos?
Well, I don't think it's going to be wrapped up because there's something people like to talk about called the attention economy. And one of the things that this on-again, off-again paused back on tariff regime of Trump's has given him is attention. And so if you've got something that you don't want attention paid to, such as the consequences of the one big beautiful bill that just got passed or the proposed legislation on crypto that's sort of sitting in the Senate at the moment, you might want to go look over there. And so I suspect that having extracted one set of circumstances or conditions that he thinks he's getting, even though the devil's still in the detail and these deals still actually need to be worked out, they're more deals to have deals than anything else, that, it won't be settled. It might look settled for a little while, but then it's going to sort of rear up again and go, what do I want now? So I suspect that we're going to find that, this isn't the end of it, that the whole tariff game is something that will continue on. And it's very, very concerning from, sort of a global stability and an investor stability perspective. So the only thing that would happen is if markets really said, no, we've had enough of the uncertainty, you pick your tariff, stick to it, keep it low as possible, and then we can adjust, then that might be, a way forward. So we look forward to August 1st and hope that, the US decides to go down that kind of pathway, but I wouldn't hold my breath.
Jenny Gordon, thank you so much.
Thank you.